Some things are just unacceptable, right? There's levels to this, and the context is always needed, even though it gets removed on social media and from the casual fan. And I see people saying, oh, look at these whiny Warrior fans, and they're unappreciated. No. Have you been watching? Have you been watching? This is about as ugly as it can get. Again, you can lose. Not like that. Not like that. This is getting to levels of humiliation, of where something drastic has to happen. So I thought we would hand out some blame pie, because there's plenty to go around, right? We can't place it all on Kerr. You can't place it, Draymond. You can't do that. It's an accumulation of things. But let's start at the top. Let's start at the top with the front office in Mike Dunleavy Jr. and Joe Lacob. Seemingly had a good offseason. They had a good draft, right? Dario Saric was a nice signing, but ultimately they failed this roster by adding more size. Something that we've all been whining about for, it feels like 2 or 3 seasons now, right? And you can point to the exact move. It's the Corey Joseph move. You bring in another point guard behind CP3, and what they didn't know was behind Podziemski, which I guess he's a combo guard, right? But it's the Corey Joe spot that should have been another adequate big body. So they deserve, there's that. Y'all can sit with that. You get that blame, despite having a nice draft, right? Now we move to Steve Kerr, probably the biggest hot button topic in Dub Nation. And listen, I get it. There is a chicken or egg element when it comes to coaching, and you hear some fans say, well, what is he supposed to make them hustle back on defense? Is he the one blowing, that where's their energy and their effort? They have to bring that, right? And you also hear people say, well, look, 9 rings. Like I had a guy today, hey, you're really blaming Kerr. Like, no, listen, everything runs its course, right? Like, just because Steve Kerr was a great coach doesn't mean he's still a great coach for this situation. There's a shelf life. There's an expiration date on these things. That's just what history shows you. So it's not to say that he isn't a good coach. He is not a good coach for this team any longer, right? And so people are right in the sense of, listen, at a certain point here, and we're going to talk about the Splash Brothers and Draymond and all that here in a second, because they get a piece of pie as well, right? But when I say chicken or egg, Kerr has allowed it to get to this, right? You heard him last night say, hey, they've lost belief. They've lost their confidence, right? Well, how have you let them get to this? Your poor decisions, whether it's, we could go back to the Moody in Sacramento, all those things have snowballed and led to where we're at now. He is the head coach. And so, yes, he certainly deserves a nice big chunk of pie when we're talking about blame. There's no doubt about it. Next up, Draymond. Don't really got to explain this one, right? And the whack part about it is Draymond came into this year looking as good as he had in a long time. He was hitting the 3. He was in shape. He was being aggressive offensively, right? But availability is the best ability. And so we all, again, we don't have to explain it. We know why Draymond deserves his portion of this, because he is the leader. He is the leader. And that's will take me into this next topic here, because Steph Curry, listen, he is the greatest shooter of all time, objectively speaking. Do not confuse that with being the leader of this team. He was never the leader of this team. It was Draymond and it was Andre Iguodala. And now Steph never had to grow into being that leader, because again, it was always Draymond and Andre Iguodala. They helped each other in that way. Andre, reluctant scorer. Draymond, not a scorer. Well, we've got the 2 greatest shooters ever in a backcourt were the leaders, right? And so right now you're seeing that. Steph is not a leader. He's not leading this team. And so he desperately needs Draymond back on the floor. And so that goes back to Draymond not being available. And it was funny because I was thinking about, how it's almost like an archetype thing. How many, if you listed off the 10 greatest shooters in NBA history, how many of them would you say, hey, they were a leader on their team? It almost like, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I think there's something to it. And what I mean by is you talk about nature versus nurture. Some people are going to say, hey, leaders are born, right? Fair. I think there is a part of that, right? But this isn't science, right? This is kind of it's kind of a magical chemistry thing when you talk about leadership and can you grow into it. But there's definitely an innate ability to lead that I've seen in young people and lack thereof in others, right? But it's almost as if you've come up being the shooter on your team and you're a shooter, it's like for some reason those leadership traits, you don't ever take them on, right? I don't know. It's just something to think about. And so both Steph and Klay, they're not leaders. The two greatest shooters to ever be paired together, they're not leaders. It is what it is. I mean, y'all could be mad about it. It's the truth. And you're seeing it play out right now. Now, all of that said, Looney's got to go. Looney's got to go. I hate to make Loon the scapegoat because I think there is and I don't mean go like he has to be traded off this roster. He cannot play very many minutes right now in the NBA. He cannot do it. Not with this team. You combine the fact that he's slowed down because he's out of shape or his body is betraying him. You can choose which one that is, right? But then the pace of the game now, the transition defense and the way the game's being played, he can't get up and down the court. He can't get up and down the court. You see our transition defense is a disaster. And then offensively, you're going to ask a 36-year-old, soon-to-be 36-year-old Steph Curry to play 4-on-5. Those screens are fruitless. They're just showing to it Steph every time. He's too slow to roll to the basket. And so he can't be on the floor. He can't be on the floor right now, man. I've come to that. I've been holding out hope for a while until he's moving better. He's got to be like spot minutes, but I get it. We don't have any other choice right now with the injuries and the lack of size on the roster. Now, Podziemski, listen, I understand where people were like, hey, this is a little bit too much Pods, right? It's probably a little too much Dario as well, right? But this is what happens when there's a lack of leadership and a lack of congruency. And, Podziemski, I think ideally is what he is he's a really good third guard, right? He's a guard that you bring off your bench and he plays with second units and he brings the energy up. And I understand why Steve is leaning on him so much right now because he's one of the only players that's bringing a competitive spirit and an energy consistently. And so he's winning all these minutes just from that alone. But now you have him out there switching on Brandon Ingram, switching on James Harden, and you're asking too much. We're kind of losing sight of who he is and what we drafted him for. So I'm not going to place any blame on him, but he's being thrust into too many minutes. That's just the truth of the matter. Defensively, transition defense is such an issue. I don't know if Draymond can solve it, man. You've got Klay and Kuminga who just don't talk, right? Looney can't get back. He can't get back in time. And then Steph, who's trying to switch off everybody, right? Steph is defending like a victim right now. That's what Steph's doing. He's defending like a victim. I know you don't want to hear it about your golden boy, but Steph, he's defending like a victim. He's pouting on the court offensively, and he's frustrated, and he has every right to be. But again, he's not a leader. He's the greatest shooter of all time. He's not the leader. The leader's in street clothes. So there's plenty of blame to go around, right? I think the one intriguing thing right now is it is getting so humiliating and so bad, such a bad product. You hear the boos. I guess that's what we got to talk about. The boos raining down at Chase Center. Look, Klay has shown us who he is, man. Klay's an asshole. Okay, like I can deal with it, man, because I loved it when he was in his prime, right? And when it was masked by dominance, you got to take the good with the bad. Fine. Klay just has to understand when you make those comments to the fan base, you've opened up the floodgates now. You've opened up the floodgates. You got to move with a little more finesse than that. I thought Looney put it best, right, where he said something along the lines of, "Hey, it sucks, but we deserve it. We're playing like that." And Steph said something as well, but Klay's going to be Klay, right? And so I'm not surprised he said it. I'm fine. That's how you're going to deal with it. Just know if this continues, you're going to get it the worst. You're going to get it the worst because, again, this isn't just like not getting it done and being in competitive games. These are like you know how much money these fans are paying to go to these games? That's an unacceptable product right now. And so, again, that's maybe the exciting thing. It's gotten so bad, Something drastic has to happen. And you heard Steph allude to it post-game, like, hey, keep doing the same thing and expecting it to be different. That's the definition of insanity. And so we got like a month until the trade deadline. Everyone's on the table. Everyone's on the table, not named Chef. That's what it's going to be. I don't know if it's going to fix it. And again, can't put it all on Kerr. Can't put it all on Draymond. It's an accumulation that snowballed to humiliation. I'm tired of watching it. I know y'all are tired of watching it. And those are my thoughts. Hit that like, share, and subscribe. I'm out, y'all.